Welcome to this Final Cut Pro 10 training. My name is Larry Jordan, and this is a part of Chapter 3, explaining Final Cut Pro's preference settings. The goals for this session are to showcase that preferences have been simplified into 3 panes: editing, playback, and import. This session explains what the preferences mean and which ones to select for your project. I guess the key point is that many of the preferences we became used to in the past are no longer needed as the application moves to faster processing with an emphasis on tapeless media. Although some of the preference settings depend totally on your style of shooting and what you need the program to do, some of the others I can recommend specific settings that would make a difference in your editing. It's too early to know how stable preference files are and whether trashing them improves program stability. For now, make it a point to leave preferences that are stored on your hard disk alone. Don't delete them. Let me show you now how we can open Final Cut Pro's preferences and how to customize your settings. Final Cut Pro's preferences are stored in the Final Cut Pro menu inside Preferences. Keyboard shortcut is Command, and as you can see, there are 3 panes. The editing pane has just a few choices in it. First, you get to select what your time display is. Is it standard timecode with subframes, just a straight frame count, or seconds, ignoring frames and subframes? For most video editors, I would recommend the default, which is standard timecode, hours, minutes, seconds, and frames. When the timeline checkboxes are checked, and both of these are the default, show detailed trimming feedback means that if you are trimming 2 clips, you're going to see 2 small images here in the viewer. The left-hand image shows the out, the right-hand image shows the in. This is very similar to the visual feedback we get in Final Cut 7 and earlier versions when you are trimming between 2 clips. For most editors, leaving this option on is a good thing. However, if those 2 small pictures are driving you completely nuts, then uncheck the top timeline checkbox. Position playhead after the edit operation means that when I edit a clip to the timeline, the playhead will automatically jump to the end of the clip. This is normal behavior inside all the versions of Final Cut. If you want the playhead to hold still and not jump to the end of the clip, uncheck this checkbox. My personal recommendation is to set both of these to on. Audio. Show reference waveforms. When this is checked, Final Cut displays a ghost waveform that extends the full height of the waveform display. This is very helpful when you're trying to see waveforms of very soft clips. Turning this on does not affect the volume of your audio, and I illustrate this in more detail in Chapter 9 when we cover audio. I find this a very useful feature when working with soft sound effects. When you import a still image, the default length is 4 seconds, but this is not frames. This is now hundredths of a second. I wish it was frames, but it isn't. So we can now change the default length to be, in this case, default is 4 seconds. We can make it 3 seconds and a half, or whatever number is appropriate for our project. Same thing with transitions. The default length of a transition is 1 second, with hundredths of a second following the period. Again, I wish this was frames. It isn't. It's in hundredths of a second. One of the neat features that we do have is this. Full overlap means that we are doing the transition based upon handles, extra video after the out and extra video before the in, or available media. If you're using every possible part of a clip, then you want to use available media. Most video editors are familiar with handles, and you want to take advantage of what handles provide. Leaving this set to full overlap is a good choice. Again, if you're new to editing, available media. If you're an experienced editor, full overlap. This resets all the dialogues, which I'm sure is a nice thing, and I'm just going to leave it alone. When you go to the playback pane, background render is turned on. This is a good thing. But if your machine is too slow and it keeps bogging down with all the background rendering that's going on, uncheck it, and the system will render whenever you tell it to, but not do it in the background. And the 5 seconds means that it's going to wait 5 seconds for the mouse to stop moving or the keyboard to stop being pressed before it triggers background rendering. We have 2 options for playback: use proxy media and use original or optimized media. If small file size is more important than image quality, for instance, you're editing on a small drive on a laptop, then use proxy media. If, on the other hand, image quality is more important than file size, then use original or optimized media. And for playback quality, if you want the best performance, you want everything to be nice and quick and snappy, set it at better performance, but the image quality during editing playback will drop a little bit. If image quality during playback is critical, then go with high quality. High quality would be appropriate when you're doing color correction and final finishing, but better performance would be a better choice when you're doing editing. It doesn't make any difference which of these you select for final output, because final output will always be at the highest possible quality. I would probably opt for better performance until I'm doing my final color pass and then switch it to highest quality. Warn when dropping frames during playback is off by default. This one I think is a really big one, and it needs to be on. Dropping frames means that your hard disk is too slow to support the video format that you've selected. You always want to know when this is happening, because you never ever want to drop frames unaware, because it's just going to destroy your whole piece. Now, if you don't care about the quality of your video, then uncheck this. If you do, it may be that your hard drive is too slow or you've connected it incorrectly, but it's an error that needs to be addressed, and you need to figure out how to fix it and get it fixed, because the purpose of your editing system is to be able to smoothly play video consistently across the editing process, and you can't fix what you don't know is broken. This tells you when it's broken. The pre-roll and post-roll duration is relevant when you're doing loop playback or when you're auditioning clips. It determines how many seconds before the position of the playhead you're going to go and how many seconds after. For me, I would set this to 4 seconds before and 3 seconds after. That's the setting that I use. Player background defaults to black, but you can change it to white or checkerboard, which would indicate transparent. That's like the background in Photoshop. If you set it to white, and I'm going to close this because otherwise I won't be able to see the change. Close this. By the way, you don't have to click OK. As soon as you close it, your preferences are accepted. I'm going to select a clip and go to this window here and just make this clip smaller. Notice that we've got a white background on either side of the clip. Well, this white background helps me to see maybe black text or a black shadow or something better than I could see it with a black background. This only affects the playback inside Final Cut. When I export this movie or lay it to tape, it has a black background. This does not affect export. It just affects what we're looking at inside the viewer window inside Final Cut. Command Z and turn off that switch. Go back to Preferences. The third pane is Import. There's two different places that you can see this import dialog. One is here as a preference where you can set your preferences and it'll just be copied when you open up a new clip. And the other time is when you go to import a clip. The reason this is so important is not only can we import clips using the event library or the event browser, but we can also drag clips from the Finder directly into the timeline, or from the Finder into the event browser, or from the photo browser directly into the timeline. And when we do any one of those three things, these settings in the preference take priority. So what do? Copy files to Final Cut Events folder. This takes your media, wherever it's stored, makes a copy of it in the Events folder. This is an excellent choice for people that hate getting organized as editors. Unchecking this means that Final Cut points to links to the files wherever they're stored on your hard disk. If you're an editor, especially an editor for a long time, you are obsessively organized in terms of where your files get stored, and you don't want Final Cut to copy them because you've already got them organized the way you want. So you want to uncheck that top option. Final Cut will leave your media wherever it is and just point to it. This is the default behavior of Final Cut 10. Unchecking is the default behavior of Final Cut 7. Import folders as keyword collections. If you've got a folder name on your media that actually makes sense, you're doing tapeless media and you've got a project ID and a date shot and a card number, you want to maintain that information. So keep import folders checked. It then comes in as a keyword collection, and you can then do searches and sorts on that keyword. Create optimized media means that you are transcoding a video format into ProRes, specifically ProRes 4:2. This is the best choice even though Final Cut will edit H.264 natively or edit MPEG-2 natively. Creating optimized media makes for faster render files and makes for faster editing. However, it does increase the storage requirements of your system. If keeping your files small is more important than performance in editing, uncheck this. If image quality and performance in editing are of greater priority, then check this. My recommendation is optimized media is, in general, a good thing. I recommend you check it. Create proxy media means that it's going to create a low-resolution file with very small file requirements. This is, again, useful if you wanted to edit on a laptop and you don't need image quality because you're going to go back later and reconcile a low-res version to a high-res version. Proxy media then creates the smaller file. My recommendation is don't create proxy media unless you're comfortable with dealing between low-res and high-res media. Analyze for stabilization and rolling shutter should only be turned on if you're dealing with handheld video or video shot on HD SLR camera. Handheld requires stabilization so your audience doesn't get seasick, and HD SLR cameras are known for causing a rolling shutter. What this does is this sets a keyword saying that it needs stabilization or it has a rolling shutter, and when you drop the clip to the timeline, Final Cut will image stabilize it or solve the rolling shutter problem. So this is doing two things. It's analyzing and applying a keyword. My recommendation is if you're always on a tripod and you're not using HD SLR video, turn this off. You don't need it. Analyze for balanced color. Final Cut will go through and take a look at the color balance and apply color correction to it. Now you can turn this off without damage to the clip. If your color is reasonably good or you know what you're doing, then leave this off. If you're winging it and you're just hoping and praying the color is right because there just isn't time to set up properly, turn this on and Final Cut can give you a hand in making your pictures look good. Find People will go through all of your shots and start to put keywords in where it finds the same person, or where it finds single shots, close-ups, or where it finds two shots or wide shots, and it starts to keyframe based upon face detection and people detection. And when you turn Consolidate Find People results on, it will then group inside the event library and the event browser the people that it finds. Depending upon how organized you are, this is either a really good thing or a really bad thing, and I don't have an opinion on it. Try it both ways. See which one works the best for you. If you turn on any of these analysis options, you also want to create a smart collection after analysis. What a smart collection does is it says, these are all the clips that need image stabilization. These are all the clips that need color correction. And it builds a smart collection. It doesn't duplicate your media. It's just putting a list together like a playlist inside iTunes that lists all the clips that need stabilization or rolling shutter fixed. Again, all of this will vary depending upon how you shoot and the camera format that you shoot, and whether you want to turn these on or off will really depend upon personalized criteria. I don't have opinions on this. It's still too early to know how well all this works. Audio Analyze and Fix Audio Problems will look for and fix problems related to hum, to noise, and to loudness. I studied this and I realized that while it is fixing the audio, you have the ability to override the fix. Consequently, I'm now a fan of this. I like the fact that it analyzes, I like the fact it proposes a fix, and I especially like the fact that you can override the fix if you don't like it. For this reason, I encourage you to always have this checked. We talk about this more in Chapter 9 when we talk about audio. This one, though, I like a great deal. Separate mono and group stereo audio. If you're doing interviews should always be captured dual channel mono. Gives you the greatest control over your mix, gives you the greatest control over your audio. You do not want to capture interview audio as a stereo pair. What this does is this recognizes the difference between something which is captured in stereo, sound effects, music, versus something which should be captured in dual channel mono, interviews and talking heads. Having this checked is a really good thing, and I recommend it. If you've recorded an interview and you've plugged their mic into channel 1, there's no audio on channel 2. You don't want to have it take up space on your hard drive for something which has no audio. For this reason, you want to remove channels, audio channels, which are silent. So for me, my settings are, if I'm organized, I'm going to link. If I'm not organized, I'm going to copy. I do like keyword collections. I do like optimized media. I leave this off until I have a specific need for it. And because I have the ability to change the fix if it's applied, I turn all three of these audio settings on. So these are how I set my preference settings. After the complexity of Final Cut 7's preferences and their inherent instability, the preference settings in Final Cut Pro 10 seem almost too easy. However, really pay close attention to setting project preferences and video preferences on importing, because these have a dramatic impact on the operation of the program, both in terms of performance and file size. My name is Larry Jordan, and thanks for watching this Final Cut Pro 10 training.